So this is kind of a strange topic today, especially given the timing. Modern Warfare 2's beta finished up the other day, right? And during those 2 weekends that we saw with Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer, we heard a lot of, well, we want your feedback, and then we saw a few mentions and communication from Infinity Ward with that feedback, but most of it was like, okay, we hear you, you bring up valid points, but we're not changing it. Now, to each their own on how you feel about that outcome, but objective point being Infinity Ward for multiplayer in particular seemed to really be sticking to their guns, regardless of the level of support for some of the design decisions. However, within the last couple of days here, it seems like Infinity Ward's other major project with this coming year, Warzone 2, actually looks to have some major changes coming to the fundamentals of the game. Today, we're running down all of that, so as we go along, drop your thoughts down below. Are you looking forward to seeing any of these changes? Anything you'd like to see changed further? Anything you'd like to see maybe them stick to their guns on here with this? Whatever the case, feel free to drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoyed the video, if you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing running all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, DMZ, and anything Call of Duty going up here in the next year or so. We've got a busy couple of weeks to months for the launch of Modern Warfare 2 and beyond. So if you guys would like to stay on top of everything while joining us on the road to 500,000 subscribers, I'd love to have you in the community. For now, let's talk about these changes within Warzone 2 that are apparently already in the works. Now, this information we're going to be discussing today comes from content creator and streamer Metaphor, who we've talked about here on the channel once or twice before, who apparently has some inside insight into the development of Warzone 2, but also who in the past has actually predicted some stuff correctly, having, from what I heard, actual gameplay of the game before it was released public and before we had that reveal for Warzone 2. So from the past track record, as well as what appears to be others corroborating the story along the way, other insiders that we'll talk about here as we go along, this might actually be something to consider, though with all leaks, do take it with a grain of salt. Things in development are subject to change, so it could be something that they're testing out, could be something they're implementing, or we just might not see it at all. Whatever the case, his tweet detailing this was a little cryptic, simply being emojis with different checks or X's next to them. Now, there are 4 things here listed, the first of which appears to be AI is no longer all over the map. This was also further elaborated on by Tom Henderson, saying that what he heard was the build was being reverted back to an earlier version in the year with less AI across the map. And for me, that is absolutely great news. One of the big things that I had an issue with at COD Next when we actually played Warzone 2 was the distribution of AI and the way they were handled on the TAC map, UAVs, and other things like that. Other tool sets that should help you identify where enemy combatants are versus AI, they were kind of all blended into one. You had AI way too commonly distributed in higher populated areas, maybe even in just random fields, where you're like, why would there be an AI here with this? But also, if you pop the UAV, they'd still show up as regular players. There was no indicator as to if this was an AI versus a regular player. I had seen many clips where my friends that were also at this event playing, they saw a player, went to engage with them, but then they ended up taking out an AI, thinking that was who they were chasing down. But in fact, that AI was just kind of there while the enemy player was also around them, and it was almost bait in a sense, where the tool sets they had, it looked like a regular player, maybe say on a UAV, but it wasn't. So I'm okay with that change. I think that one might be a little inconsequential to the overall gameplay loop by comparison, but Metaphor also went on to say that AI are now only in Strongholds. And again, I'm okay with this one. While I could see maybe AI here and there, it just seemed like they were too commonly distributed across the world in places that they didn't need to be. Having them in Strongholds absolutely gives them purpose here in the Battle Royale experience. It's very similar to what we see now within the current Warzone experience. That mercenary event on Fortune's Keep, the previous bunkers in Caldera, things like Factory in Caldera in the past, stuff that actually gives some sort of meaning to those AI being there to hold down a certain location rather than just kind of being props in the Warzone world. So that one I'm okay with as well. But perhaps the biggest one here that was mentioned out of these changes is the fact that loadouts and perks are apparently coming back, according to Metaphor and what he heard from the insider insight. And this one is probably going to be pretty divisive. I know that whenever we talked about this beforehand, the discussion was split kind of right down the middle, where people were like, I love Warzone's loadout system. That's what made it Warzone to me. That's why I played it over other battle royales. And then others that were like, I didn't like it. It kind of made it a singular gun sort of meta in which you were always playing the same things. It detracts from the random RNG of the gameplay loop that BR is. There's a whole different number of reasons you could say for one side or the other. And regardless of where you stand, objectively, that's what is being reported here. Perks were something that, of course, are tethered to the loadout system now, but it was something that we didn't quite have any insight into how they'd work in the future. It was detailed after COD Next that we would see perks coming in the Warzone gameplay loop for the build that they had intended in some capacity post-launch, not at launch of the game on November 16th in that Warzone and DMZ experience, but instead after that. So we didn't have any insight into that, but if the Warzone loadout system is coming back for Warzone 2, that seems like how they're going to be handling it once again. And finally, the last thing that Metaphor detailed here in this sort of cryptic tweet was that the looting UI is being changed. And that's something that, as we'll talk about in a second, I'm kind of on the fence with. At the COD Next build, just because we were so used to how Warzone worked, it was kind of clunky. It felt different, but again, as we talked about, it's very similar to what we saw with other battle royales, other survival and extraction-based modes, where it did make sense. It was just different, so it'd take a little bit of time to get used to. However, with this being reverted, I'm wondering if that is pertaining simply to Warzone, or if that pertains to both Warzone and DMZ. But for those that did think it was clunky, it should be something that this might be worked out now for the launch of the game. Now, with that in mind, if these do actually come to the full build of the game, if they do make these changes and at November 16th's launch, it is different from what we saw at COD Next, is that good or bad? Honestly, I think that's kind of subjective. I can't really say for you if I think that's good or bad, but to me, it's just kind of odd the way that things are turning out by comparison if this all is true. I mean, MP multiplayer for Modern Warfare 2 is basically a stonewall for that feedback, sticking to their vision of the game, and then Warzone, they're just kind of loose and free about the gameplay changes. That one, I don't quite understand. I don't know why you wouldn't be receptive to changes in multiplayer, but in Warzone, you're kind of like, let's just do it. I feel like some of the multiplayer stuff that people had feedback for would be even easier to change than some of the fundamental systems in Warzone. But the only reason that I personally think of this and I think this is good news might not be exactly why you think. I'll play whatever. I said my piece before. Even if nothing was changed, I'd adapt, I'd play it, it just takes some getting used to. The reason though that I think that this is personally good news is for identity purposes. And before we jump into that, you've already talked about Warzone's identity being tethered to loadouts, the gulags and such. That's what makes it air quote unique. We get it. Yes, I know I've said that before, but also I don't mean it in that sense. I mean it more so in the sense of the identity that you can differentiate between Warzone and DMZ. That you don't have the same exact game, the only difference coming how you end the game, either being the last team standing or extracting in the DMZ mode case. I think that both games seriously have tremendous potential, but if you make them too similar in feeling, too similar in that gameplay loop, they're not going to be able to bounce off each other and bring in players from all different avenues of the video game industry. Instead, if you have them too close together, they might actually even hinder each other to the point where one doesn't grow as much as it could, severely limiting that discoverability in a sense. Of course, with an extraction-based mode like DMZ, inventory management, utility, and looting is absolutely one of the key factors of that gameplay loop. Whereas Warzone and the BR experience, yes, in other BRs you have the same looting experience that we have in the COD Next build that we saw, but at the same time, Warzone is more so trending towards that faster-paced get in and get out of the action. So if you have them too close together in design intent, I think you reach overall a less number of players than you could if they're two separate feeling experiences. So I guess that brings into question, will this affect Warzone and DMZ with these changes, or will these just simply be Warzone versus DMZ at that point, where the changes we talk about today are only Warzone and the Battle Royale experience? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but for right now, that's where we're at here in all of this. Wanted to keep you guys in the loop, so let me know your thoughts down below. Do you like the sound of these changes? Maybe not so much. Whatever the case, drop it down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing getting all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone, and DMZ here upcoming in the future. We've got a lot on deck in the next couple of weeks to months, so if you'd like to join us on the road to 500,000 subscribers, I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mod is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.